Item number 7, Superintendent's report.
Enrollment presentation. Dr. Marquardt.
This is a bit of an experiment for us tonight because the equipment in this room is new. The camera equipment, the recording equipment, the projection equipment, and the person who typically is the overseer of this is not here. So we're getting the second string, not to minimize the capability. But Sean Whalen left today. Sean Whalen's father, as some of you may have known, has been ill for some time. Over the last couple weeks, his condition has worsened considerably. He was put into hospice care about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and just this afternoon he passed away shortly before 4 o'clock. Sean was here this morning setting this up, and I want people to know that because it's the kind of dedication he has. This morning it was a little bit of a reprieve for him, I think, and a little bit of a diversion. But he knew his father's passing was imminent. He knew it would be today, tomorrow, or the next day, based on the timeline that had been set for him. So our thoughts and prayers are with Sean tonight and with his family. He was with his dad when his dad passed, and that was where we wanted him to be, where he needed to be. But certainly he was an exemplary son, and I'm sure he has no regrets in terms of how he treated his father, because he showed love and compassion and care right up until the very end for his dad. And that's important for us all to remember. The topic tonight that I'm going to address has been one of long-standing discussion in the West Geauga community. I was aware of it when I applied for this position approximately 9 months ago. I can remember sitting in the conference room and the board saying to me, "What do you think about open enrollment?" Now keep in mind, I'm a candidate for the position. I guess what I would have liked to have said is, well, let me see by a show of hands what you guys think of it. And then I'll answer the question. But they didn't give me that opportunity. So I had to answer a question that sort of took me down a couple of different paths and described a little bit of what my experience had been with open enrollment in other school districts. I'm not sure that I can make everyone happy tonight, but my goal is not to establish a policy for the board. That's not my role. I'm an advisor to the board, certainly, but I don't make the decisions of the board. So what I can do is to give you the facts related to open enrollment, and then to discuss some suggestions that I would have for the board to consider moving forward. That's where we're going to start tonight, and I guess with that said, we might as well start with the facts. And I have to find my little clicker where to go.
Right behind it, up by the computer, Roger.
No, you hit it on me. History of open enrollment. Started in fiscal year 2008, so essentially in 2007-2008 school year was the first year that West Geauga schools utilized open enrollment and included open enrollment students in part of their student body. From what we can see and what we can determine, it looks as though the initial open enrollment from 2007 to 2011 was open enrollment that was available to students from contiguous districts, districts that touched up against West G. And then in 2011 to the present, the board has adopted a statewide open enrollment policy, which means that students from any district in the state may attend school in West Geauga, assuming that they can get here. Obviously, there's a distance limit on such students. Let's see what this looks like. And you can see from the numbers there that are on the screen, those of you who have very young, very keen eyes can perhaps see the numbers on the screen. Those of you who have eyes like mine, which are more mature, cannot. But what it says basically is that we moved from an enrollment of 29 students at open enrollment's inception in the district to a peak of 227 to our current level of 140. During those same years, our enrollment of resident students has declined. This shows you basically where our resident students' enrollment is tracked over those same years. From a high of 2220 to the present number of 1835. Open enrollment has had a mollifying effect on our overall district enrollment numbers. So if you look, you will see that we have all of our students listed here. 1834 would be the second line, our resident students would be the blue line. All of our students, including our open enrollment students, would be the top line, which depending on whether you have color challenges as I believe I do, that looks just like sort of a green line to me. I don't know what's green or gold to you.
That
But
would be olive green.
Olive green, whatever you want to call it. The green line is all of our students, the blue line would be our resident students, the orangish line at the bottom would represent our open enrollment students. So when you look at our open enrollment students plus our resident students, you obviously come up with the top line, which is the olive green line, which is all of our students. In 2011, the board commissioned an enrollment projection study by DeJong Healy. And if you look at the projections of that study, you will see that we have actually not met the predicted number of students. The top line, which I know is navy blue because we discussed the colors of these lines today, and the bottom line, which is more of a royal blue, shows you the difference between our resident students and the projections of the DeJong Healy study. Even if you put our open enrollment students into that mix, it would not reach the level of where the projection study was for this year by DeJong Healy. The open enrollment students are not in that royal blue line, but if they were added, we still would not be up to the level of the navy blue line. This slide depicts building capacities, and it does include open enrollment. If you look at that slide, one of the things that you'll see is that the capacities state that our buildings are utilized to a degree that is significantly less than 100%. And you can see the numbers on there, from a high of what, 74% to a low of about 68%. Is that correct? 63. 3 is an eighth of a level, like 100 miles away. Anyway, when you look at those numbers, well, I want you to be aware of a couple things. Those are generated by numbers that come out of the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. That group is one which has done a lot with the building and new construction in the state of Ohio. So when they're talking about 100% capacity or building capacity, and they're looking at 100% utilization, they're taking into effect not only that every classroom is used, but every classroom is used every period. So for instance, in order to achieve 100% utilization of a building, if you had an 8-period day, one teacher might teach 5 or 6 classes in that classroom, and someone else would be teaching an elective course or something else, or study hall in that classroom for the others. So most schools never would achieve 100% capacity, okay? So although it looks as though our schools are big enough to put 1 million more kids in, really that's a square footage based comparison, and no school really operates at 100% capacity. I think a better indicator would be for us to look at grade level capacity. I think that it's a more realistic way to determine the capacity of what we can have, because it incorporates not only the building square footage, but also the number of staff that we have. Open enrollment is not designed to make school districts add staff. It's designed to find how many students can come into a district and be supported by existing staff, and therefore represent really pure revenue for the districts as they come in. And I don't say that to minimize the personal importance to the kids. I know it sounds like I'm an economist when I say it, but I really am not for a minute trying to make it sound as though our kids are not people, because they certainly are people and not dollar signs. If you look at this, what we've tried to do is we have tried to consider class sizes and to restrict our class sizes ideally to being 23 students per class in grades K2 and 25 students in a class for the balance of the grades 3 through 12. And at the high school level and the middle school level, what we utilized for that was to look at basically our English departments to determine that ratio, because every kid takes English throughout the course of a day, or language arts. They may not take some of their other electives. So that was how we considered where we were with our grade level capacities. If you look at the first column, the second or the last column, I think those are the ones that are probably the most significant ones for you to compare. Because in the first column, you basically have the grade level capacities, and then in the second one you have or in the last one you have the 2016-17 caps. So if you look at the grade level capacities, for instance, in kindergarten and in first grade, and then you look across, at the caps, you can see that what we have done in the elementary levels is we have made sure that we are not adding students into classrooms where we don't have room, where we have had significantly more wiggle room in grades 7 through 12. This is basically what it looks like if you depicted this bar graph, which is certainly easier to see. If you're looking at the capacity in the first column, and you're looking at the caps in the third column in the red, you'll see that as you're in the elementary grades, our actual number of students enrolled in those classes, our resident students in those classes, exceeds the caps and is consistent with the capacity. When you look at grades 7 and beyond, you'll see that the capacity of the classes is significantly greater than the caps that as you get into the higher grades, you'll see that we have raised the caps higher than the actual enrollees in there to allow for more students to enter, because we do have space for those students in those grades, based upon both building capacity and grade level capacity. Is that clear to everybody? Okay. One of the questions that comes up when we talk about open enrollment is how do the students that are products of open enrollment and come from other districts compare to our students in terms of resident students? And I have to caution when I say our students, they're all our students. Once a student comes in from open enrollment, he or she is every bit as much our student as a student who lives here. And they're treated the same, and they have the same opportunities. But it's interesting when you look at where they come in, you'll see that for the most part, we see a consistency. Our open enrollment students tend to match or exceed the performance of our resident students on the state mandated achievement tests. And that's, I think, an important factor to remember. They're certainly not pulling down our scores. As I say, their passage rate is equal or better than that of the resident students in our district. More colorful depiction of that same fact. And you can see that the open enrollment students are matching or exceeding the performance of the resident students on the state tests. We have a similar situation when we look at ACT scores. And one of the things that I suppose you should really notice about this is this is a snapshot that's not a single snapshot, it's a longitudinal look. You're looking over 5 years there. And you can see that over 5 years, the consistency in the scores between our resident students in blue and our non-resident students in orange is very, very, very close. With the exception of the first year where our resident students outperformed the non-resident students by just a tad, it's been equal, or our non-resident students have either exceeded or matched our resident students in terms of their performance on the ACT. The numbers at the top basically correspond to the bar graphs at the bottom. This next slide is kind of interesting. It shows a problem, but it also shows a problem that I hope is being addressed. When you look at our student achievement comparison, we look at AP enrollment as one indicator of how far kids are being stretched or how far kids are being urged to achieve. You can see that a higher portion of our resident students are taking AP courses versus our open enrollment students. You can see in 2014, 2015, you have a gap there of 12% for our non-resident student enrollment and 18% for our resident students. You can see that gap closing though in 2015-16, and part of that I think is due to the increase in open enrollment offerings, and then also possibly I really can't say greater involvement on the part of open enrollment parents in the planning of the programming for their students, or a greater sensitivity on the part of the guidance counselors to make sure that open enrollment enrollment students avail themselves of all the opportunities that we offer. So that's one that I think we have to look at, because certainly the achievement of our open enrollment students suggests that they should be represented, at a level commensurate with our resident students. But they are not at this point in time. Student discipline is another factor that we consider. For student discipline, we're looking here, I believe, at, and anyone who's been working with me on this, I believe we're just looking at suspensions and Saturday schools when you look at student discipline. But again, when you see that, our open enrollment students are not commanding most of our time, nor are they the source of our greatest disciplinary issues. Again, our resident students are in blue, our open enrollment students are in reddish orange. And that's one of the charts on which you want to be the shorter bar, because it represents student discipline issues. Again, not that you can see this real closely, but these are the numbers that correspond to the graph. So if any of you want to check the accuracy of our bar graphs, they'll be available for you. And I can get these numbers to you as well as this presentation. In fact, I've been thinking of actually possibly posting this on the website so that everyone can get it. It's a public record. I'm not trying to hide anything here, so if we have it on the website, I think if you can't read these numbers here, you can at least access it down and look them over. This represents revenue from open enrollment. No surprise, as our open enrollment numbers, when they were at their highest, the revenue from open enrollment was also at its highest. So you can see that it has gone up in an ascending fashion. It has peaked, and now as open enrollment has decreased somewhat in the district as a result of where caps were placed, et cetera. The corresponding revenue from that open enrollment has declined. At its peak, we were receiving about $1.3 million in revenue from open enrollment. Currently, we are right around $826,000. So that you understand how this works, and I'm not trying to be condescending with this, I want to reiterate something that I said a little bit earlier. We receive $5,900 per student when open enrollment students come to West Geauga. Keep in mind, this represents additional revenue because we're not adding costs to house these open enrollment students. In other words, we're not adding staff, we're not having to turn up the heat, we're not having to add on to buildings. So they're occupying space that we currently have in our classrooms and in our buildings. So that when you look at $5,900, $5,900 does represent gross additional revenue for the schools. I can't say that we really net that, and I'm going to explain that a little bit in my next slide. Okay. When we talk about net revenues, you have to understand that not every kid who comes to West Geauga schools as a result of open enrollment necessarily stays in West Geauga schools. Some of the kids come here and take part, as they certainly have the right to do, in College Credit Plus, which means that they are going to colleges and earning college credit while they are a student here. A greater number, and I believe it's 18, actually participate in the XL Tech program. The XL Tech program is a program of which we are a member. It's a consortium program. So when a student goes into the XL Tech program, we, if they're an open enrollment student, would have to pay tuition for them to be in that program. I think the prices one we have right now is right around $10,000. It's not.
Excellent.
Well, it's housing Beechwood, so you know.
It's pricey. I didn't want to say that. I'm superintendent back here.
I have two of those, in fact. Okay, so what you're seeing there is that really, we do not gain the entire amount, because once you net out the costs that are associated with it, you do see that obviously there are some costs that, in the case of some students, could actually exceed the amount that we get in, I'm saying. In addition to the open enrollment revenue itself and some of the issues associated with the characteristics of the students, I think it's important to know that there are other district realities that affect our discussion on open enrollment. I want to look at a few of those with you. There are internal factors to consider. We right now have a declining class size, and that's pretty apparent. It's pretty dramatic when you look at the senior class size of 196 kids, and then you look at the kindergarten of 113. Okay? There is no argument that the classes have been going down in size. Last year, I believe we graduated 225 or thereabouts. Jay, what was that? It was close to that, wasn't it?
Yes.
So our,
It's just under the.
so our class is getting smaller, and I think it's very dramatic when you look at the senior class and then you look again at the kindergarten class. There are issues of program sustainability that come with shrinking size in the district. If you want to have a plethora of honors classes, you want to have your AP classes, if you want to have a lot of your electives, some of your STEM programming, et cetera, you need kids to be in those programs. And once you get to a certain size, it's harder to field those programs than if you don't maintain that size. I remember when I interviewed for this position again about 9 months ago, one of the things that I was asked was, what do you consider to be pretty much the minimal size you want to see in a district where you can still offer the kinds of programs that'll attract kids who are looking for selected colleges, universities, et cetera. And I said, really, to have a well-rounded school district, I think you really need to have about 2,000 kids. I think that's a pretty good, solid target base. There are districts that offer wonderful programs that are significantly smaller, but in many cases they also have a significantly higher corresponding pupil performance cost. Because economies of scale, eventually will lose some of their benefit when you get into very, very small districts. And if you want to offer 25 AP offerings in a small district, and you're having a small class size, and if you want to house all the extracurricular programs, et cetera, you're going to be paying more. The co-curricular and extracurricular activities are also a factor that I think we need to consider. When you get to be a very small district, and I'm not trying to name names here, Dave, but there's some districts in the area, that have a real tough time putting a football team on the field, or putting together a choir, or putting together a band, because they just lack the numbers of kids to occupy the seats to take the field. So that's something else I think that you consider. And it all goes to what I stated, and it was sort of a risky answer because I didn't know what the board was looking at, but at the time, I gave the answer that I still would say today. I think to maintain the viability, the versatility, and some of the quality that you want in the district, you don't want to go much below 2,000 kids, or you become a very small district. Rather than a medium-sized district, you then all of a sudden become a very small district. In addition to those, what I term internal factors, I think there's some external factors that we need to consider. And it was tough for me to say where I put the first one. If I look at our homeschooling numbers, we have 25 homes where parents have elected to homeschool their children, and we have 42 students being homeschooled. Okay? I am absolutely not an opponent of homeschooling. I have 7 grandkids, one of them is homeschooled. I guess what I'm saying is there are sometimes very, very good reasons to homeschool a child, and sometimes homeschooling a child is an indication that something was missing in the program of the public schools. And while I don't want people who homeschool their children to be defensive at all, if I contact them, I really would like to know what has motivated some of these individuals to homeschool their children. In some cases, it's matters of conscience, and I understand that, and I will never argue with somebody who makes a choice for that reason. However, it's just because they think that they can give the child something at home that we cannot give the child in our schools, I want to know what that is. They may be right, they may not be right. I'll be respectful of them when I find out, but I would like to know why we have 42 students who are homeschooled in our district and why they're not in our schools. Okay? Private schools, this is one, I heard we have about 16% of our kids in private schools, and I didn't know how to get that number, because short of going door to door, which I wasn't inclined to do, although the weather was very nice, I didn't know exactly how to get a handle on how many kids that are residents of WestG actually go to private school. So we did the next best thing. I called Cheryl and said, hey Cheryl, help me out here. I wanted to know how many kids were on the rosters of our buses who were listed to ride our buses because we transport to private schools. I also wanted to know how many kids were on our payment in lieu of transportation, because when parents decide, oftentimes if they're going to a school that's not feasible for us to transport kids to that school because there's very few kids who go over because of distance, they get a payment in lieu of transportation, which is a monetary amount of money. It's insignificant, but we pay that. So I knew that if we put the two together, we'd come up with pretty much how many kids we have. And it's interesting because that 346 student figure represents about 15% of our kids. So the 16% figure that I had was really pretty accurate. And I don't know where it originated, but it was pretty close to accurate. At least about 15% of our kids go to private schools. Again, I'd have the same question, I guess. I never argue with people when they send their child to a school that they feel meets the needs of their family and their child more than the public schools. But I'd like to know why. Because if it's a faith-based reason, believe me, I will never challenge it. I'll never ask you, I'll never challenge you anyway, no matter what your decision is to send your child anywhere. But again, if it's because we don't do something academic as well as a private school, then we need to up our game. And that's honestly the way I feel about it. If it's an academic reason why parents send their kids to a private school rather than a public school, we have to look at where we're lacking. We have to do something. We have to do something to adjust to make our program better. Age of the population, the impact on the housing market. I threw in here, but I don't really know what I can say about it because I have one snapshot. I know that this year we had a lot of students enroll in our schools very late. From August 1st on, we probably double the number that we typically have. I don't know. I know we have an aged population in Geauga County in general. I know that people live here because they have family here, because of familiarity, and because of the services available in the area, proximity to Cleveland, conveniences, you name it. It's a desirable place to live. But I also know that our housing stock, particularly in West Geauga, is housing stock that is not designed for senior citizens. I mean, if you look at the homes around here, and they're located back in the woods, they have multiple steps oftentimes to get into them. They have lawns that require a great deal of upkeep, et cetera. I don't know what's going to happen as the population ages. The people who do studies are usually pretty thorough, and the people who did the study are ones who I'm sure took into account multiple factors. But I'm wondering if eventually, as the population ages, if some of them will be replaced as they move to homes that are more senior friendly with younger families who are moving here to access the beautiful yards and the woods and the opportunities to have a horse or whatever it is that brings people to Geauga County. So I don't know if this year's influx of young families with young children was an anomaly. We kept seeing families move in who were moving here because they wanted to find a great place to raise their kids. I'm not hoping that the old people suffer any misfortune in that process. I'm hoping they decide they'd like to be at the Hilton Head or somewhere like that, so they're happy to. Then the other thing that I think we have to look at, because it's certainly been in the newspaper, is the potential consolidations of Geauga County school districts. There's been a lot of talk, and you've read it, you've heard it. I don't wish to name names tonight, but there is discussion and several permutations of possible mergers of various school districts. And so I think that's something that we also have to consider. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on through the presentation. We also need to attend to some important timelines. February 1st, we're continuing to increase, to experience declining enrollment. February 1st is the date by which contractually we're obligated to inform the staff of any pending reps, if there were to be one. I'm not saying at this time there is or is not. I'm just saying that is a deadline which we have to be aware. March 11th is another deadline. That's the non-kindergarten open enrollment students being informed of their acceptance. They have until I think what time it is, the 26th or so, kind of to let us know whether they have the 25th, 26th, something like that. By March 31st, we have to send in our open enrollment decision to the state. As you know, there are two types of open enrollment and no open enrollment. You have to notify the state by March 31st of what open enrollment is going to look like for the next year. In April, we have to notify individual staff members if there is a RIF and any of them are affected by it. We have that contractual deadline also to acknowledge and to meet. And then by the end of June, this year we've done something a little bit different. The kindergarten open enrollment students will be informed of acceptance. We had a strange thing happen this year. We notified the kindergarten students early on. There was room left for the cap. We admitted 4 kindergarten students, and then we found out that we had a lot more kindergartners moving into the district, as well as 5 retentions. So it put our kindergarten numbers higher than I wanted them to be. This year our kindergartens, I believe, are at 23, and that is higher than I like. It is higher than what you'll normally see me tolerate in a kindergarten classroom. I like to see those. I'd rather put my money up front and spend it on lower class sizes and some of the lower grades than spend it on remediation once the kids get older. So those are some deadlines that we have to be aware of, and the timelines I think are important for us to recognize. So, what's next? And this is the part where I could get myself in some trouble, I guess. Here are possible courses of action. Notice I'm not recommending any of these, I'm just going to tell you what they mean. One would be end open enrollment altogether. That would displace all of our open enrollment students. There's no way to say, let's phase it out gradually, let's let the kids stay who are here, you have to notify the state of one of three things. You're either going to have open enrollment, you're not going to have open enrollment, and it's either going to be contiguous districts or it's going to be statewide. So ending open enrollment obviously would displace all of our open enrollment students. We would have to, while we did that, monitor the declining resident enrollment, because remember I said it might be turning around? I don't know based on just this year, but this is one snapshot. It could very well be an anomaly. If the projections are right, if the study in 2011 is right, we're going to continue to experience declining enrollment amongst our resident population. So we have to monitor that declining enrollment. We also have to adjust our staffing, because if we don't have kids to educate, we don't need as many staff to be working here. And that obviously comes through a number of different factors. You can look at retirements and you can shrink staff by attrition in that way. Or in some cases, you basically have to RIF staff, and that follows a policy that's prescribed in the collective bargaining agreement. And basically what that says, it's more complicated than this, but it's the last hire, the first to go. Okay? And then also we have to assess facility needs. And that's not a minor undertaking, because as your student population shrinks, as your staff shrinks, the space needed to house them also is reduced. And as you do that, you still have to look at what the needs are of those facilities. Are you talking consolidated facilities? Do you take multiple elementaries and put them into one elementary? Do you take certain elementaries offline, and if you dispose of them, how do you dispose of them? Because keep in mind, if you sell a school, your first obligation is to sell it to a charter school or to a private school. And then you're running into something where you're actually competing with the person who's bought your site. So what conventional wisdom will tell you is oftentimes if you sell a school, the best thing to do is to raise the school, tear it down, and utilize the land for another purpose. Sometimes it can be residential development, sometimes it can be commercial development or institutional development. But we need to look at that. And that's not a simple process. You know, when you decide what you're going to do with space, whether you're going renovation or whether you're going new construction, anyone who's familiar with the construction trades will tell you you're certainly going down a more certain path in terms of, and a more cost-effective path to go with new construction. So in other words, to put this in terms of what we're saying here, and I'm not saying this is something that we need to entertain now at all, but if you're looking at declining enrollment, you have 2 elementary schools, are you going to continue with 2 elementary schools indefinitely, or are you going to close one, keep one, and renovate it and expand it, at least in the short term, to allow more kids to come in? Or do you look at the elimination of both schools and construction of the new one? Those are all issues that the districts have to decide when they're looking at shrinking enrollment. And you have to go through a process in order to do that. Oftentimes the process begins with a study by a firm that comes in. The firm oftentimes has knowledge in both architecture and construction. They meet with the stakeholder groups in the community. They put together what's a preliminary study on the pros and cons of renovation, reconstruction versus new construction. They usually issue a survey to the community in which they understand and try to gain an awareness of the community's receptivity to the various options that they're putting on the table. And because usually there is a cost associated with the reduction in the renovation of facilities or in construction of new facilities. What you have to look at is the break-even time. You know, if you're building a new school with savings on operation, savings on utilities, et cetera, how long does it take for that new school to actually be cheaper for the district to maintain than it would be to renovate and to operate one or more of the old schools? But those are processes which are certainly down the line. The second would be to permit open enrollment from contiguous districts. This would displace some of our current open enrollment students, though, because any students who are not from contiguous districts would no longer be permitted to attend in that model. And that goes back to something that I said earlier. Whenever you talk about these things in a conceptual frame, it's real easy to discuss the pros and cons from a monetary standpoint. It is incredibly tough to have conversations with parents of students who are open enrollment students when it comes to telling them that their child cannot stay in the district when they've been in the district. So when you personalize it, it is a very difficult conversation to have. And that's why I put this up here, because it is certainly a viable option. The board could opt to permit open enrollment only for contiguous districts, but it would necessitate many difficult conversations with open enrollment students who would be displaced as a result of that. And I said it may reduce our total open enrollment population. I definitely think that it would, but I can't say for sure what would happen, because as we had space available, maybe more students would come in from contiguous districts. I don't know that. But my guess would be that it would certainly reduce our total open enrollment population if the board were to adopt a policy of open enrollment students only from contiguous districts. Or we could continue to do what we're doing now, and that's permit open enrollment statewide, which represents a continuation of current practice, and the caps have to be set annually for that, based upon available space and available room in our programs. So those are all viable courses of action. Different districts have great success with each and every one of them, and I'm being very honest there. I have been, in the 3 last districts that I served in, I've worked under every one of those models. Each district chose its own path. Each district had success with that path. So they're all viable. They all. There are other things that we need to consider in terms of courses of action. One would be to consider the consolidation with another school district. Again, I'm not recommending that to the board at this point. I'm just saying it's an option that's out there. And you're certainly seeing some of our neighbors undergoing that right now. They're talking about it. You'll see our names sometimes thrown into the mix in the form of a rumor in some of these discussions. Obviously, if you're going to consolidate with another district, there are certain restrictions. It can't be any district statewide, because we're not going to fly the kids from helicopter from one to the other, so it would obviously be a contiguous district if we were to do that. Although 2 of the districts that just merged are barely contiguous. They're contiguous for a few hundred feet. I'm not naming names, but I used to work there on one of them. Anyway, there are 2 ways that you can affect a consolidation also. One is a merger, and the other is through the process known as land transfer. In the case of the merger is brokered by the Ohio Department of Education. The land transfer is actually facilitated through the county ESC, which is the Educational Service Center. One of the mergers that just took place locally, the merger that took place where Ledgemont and Berkshire merged, was actually a land transfer. Ledgemont ceased to exist and became a part of Berkshire. In both cases, the consolidations require an affirmative vote of both boards of education. In neither case do they require a vote of the electorate. However, I would not recommend that a board united would go out and do this and say, surprise, to its electorate, or I think you'd be voting probably to a different board. Because there have to be discussions, and there have to be, obviously, a lot of meetings and a lot of groundwork before this would take effect. If the current mergers that are being discussed and contemplated in this county take place, I thought it was important to put that thought on the screen. That is that WestGBrd could very well find itself as the smallest school district in Geauga County in the next 5 to 10 years. If you look at our enrollment projections, and if you look at the student populations that would be achieved from these mergers, WestG could become the smallest district in Geauga County. That's not an enviable position to be in for a district. It's not an impossible position to be in for a district. It was one of the smallest districts in Cuyahoga County. It did quite well for a long time, but it also had correspondingly high costs. And so it's just something obviously to consider here when we look at this. So, recommendations. If I said I could get in trouble before, this is, I guess, where I could really get in trouble. I guess one of the things that you have to remember is my role is to put the recommendations out there and to give you some advice. But based upon nearly 20 years as superintendent, these are the things that I think the board to look at right now. I think we need to compose a 5-year projection of staffing, facility needs, and financial implications based on what we see as our projected enrollment trends and actually our actual enrollment. Because that's the best we can do. You know, we can say these are the projections, these are where we think we're going as a district. If it changes, it's going to change for the better for us because we have more kids coming in. So based upon what we know and what we think we know, I think we have to use that to the best of our knowledge to compose a 5-year projection of our staffing needs, our facility needs, and our financial implications of those. One of the things that's worth pointing out here is our facilities are aging. And please, believe me, I'm not one who's here to say we need to build a new school. I've been there, done that, you know? and it's a big, huge job. It's a big undertaking. But the fact is, you can't let facilities sit without maintenance. We have facilities now where we have to replace roofs. We have HVAC needs. With our facilities, they're going to be costly. You don't have to go very far into our buildings to see that we certainly need an upgrade in the restrooms and laboratories, classroom sinks. So there's some plumbing fixtures that certainly need to be looked at. The labs in our school, our science labs, need some updating. Need some short throw projectors in them, right, Mr. Booth? Some wiring changes. Our TV productions facility certainly needs an overhaul. That's pretty kind. So I think that we do have to look at really what do we need to continue to provide the education that we want for our kids. What do we have to do, and there are financial implications for that. So we have to look at this 5-year projection. We have to come up with the ideas of what we're going to need, what we're going to offer, and what it's going to cost. Then I think we need to gauge the community sentiment on open enrollment. Now, I know there was a survey that was done. I've seen the survey. I know there are people who question the validity of the survey. And I do not own stock in any survey company, and I don't work for one, so I'm not saying this to line my own pocket, certainly. But if there are questions about the first survey, hire a second firm. Have other questions. If you think those were misleading, if you think they were slanted in some way, and I'm not saying they are, I've looked at it. I can see where perhaps some people's concerns come from, but I don't see it as an indictment in any way of the company. It's a very respected company who did the last survey. But hire a different company, do another survey, ask the questions you need. Because I think, you hear different sides from different portions of the community. Some people are extremely opposed to open enrollment in SG, and some people are very supportive of it. And say it was a revenue stream, I don't know why we gave it up. I think there's some common ground to be had in the middle, because quite frankly, I can't disagree with everything that both sides say. So I think we do have to look at where the community stands on this and try to get a firm handle on what the community's wishes are as they relate to this. Believe me, I'm not confusing the community with the Board of Education. The community elected the Board of Education to make these decisions, and those decisions rest in the hands of the board. However, I think that it's beneficial for the board to have a snapshot of the community's sentiments on this. It's an accurate snapshot. And I've heard enough people express distrust of the first survey that I say to another one. They're not that expensive, and see if the results from the second survey confirm or refute the results of the first. I think we also need to assess the community receptivity to implications of declining enrollment. I mean, there are some people who, if you said, the district in a few years will be 1,500 kids and then it'll be 1,200 kids, they say, so what? There are other districts that do a great job with small populations. When that happens, we'll adjust and we'll deal with it. I think there are others who would say that's going to get too small. It's not going to be able to offer the types of educational opportunities we want for our students. It's not going to offer the extracurriculars. It's not going to offer the opportunities in the fine arts. So I think, again, we need to find out what the community thinks about declining enrollment. We could do it in the same survey. I'm not saying, a third survey, as I said, second survey in both of those. You could take on both topics in the survey and really find out what people believe. Once you are armed with that information, that knowledge, I think then the board can help develop a community consensus on open enrollment. Because unless you consider open enrollment in the context of all the other things I've tried to bring up tonight for you, declining enrollment, mergers of other districts, need to improve our facilities, whether we have declining enrollment or not. I think when you look at all of that in its entirety, then you can make a decision. I think if you look at open enrollment as a single entity, minus all those other internal and external factors we've identified, I don't know how you decide whether you like it or you don't. And so that's what I'm proposing to the board tonight, is to go back and take a look at it. And the other thing I would suggest is that the board exercise quality of transparency throughout the process. And that's what I've tried to sort of start tonight. And I didn't do this on my own. I did this at the request of the board. And I was not asked to lead anybody. I was not asked to take a position on open enrollment. I was not asked to come in and say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. The board pretty much, I think, knew that this was going to be a situation where I was going to come and say, I'm going to try to address the facts and maybe some of the misperceptions related to open enrollment by the community, give the truth, and then say, these are the ways that I think we can move forward to examine this issue in more depth, and hopefully to get this community working together on determining what the future of their schools is, rather than arguing over whether or not it involves students from other districts being part of ours. So in closing, I will admit to you, I don't have all the answers. Obviously, it's the board's role as elected representatives of the community to define what course of action we pursue. I do have a pretty wide-ranging experience, so I think I'll be able to help you navigate whatever path you choose to go down with open enrollment, and whatever you decide is in the best interest of the community moving forward. I'll certainly gladly serve as an advisor. In some cases, I'll be a hired gun for you if you need that, certainly, to protect the interests of the districts. But overall, the course of action that you want me to pursue in that role as advisor and hired gun certainly is going to be one which you collectively as the board need to determine. So that's it. So if you have any questions on me, I'd be happy with the next one.
Dr. Marhart, how many districts Northeast Ohio currently have open enrollment? I know that's a tough one, I'm sorry.
That's a good question. I really don't know. The three that I've been affiliated with, as I said, one has none. One has open enrollment for contiguous districts, and has open enrollment statewide. I can find that out for you. I'll be able to do that. I would guess that more have it than don't. The only reason I guess that is, in the case of some districts, it's really a matter of trying to stabilize funding. If a district is losing students because of open enrollment to other districts, they'll oftentimes open their doors to open enrollment students to offset the loss of the experience from kids going elsewhere.
Is there any vibe from the state of Ohio? Because I know with this policy, ever since the policy's been started, the state could allow it, the state could say you can't do it anymore. Is there any vibe for Columbus to say that they're weighing in one way or another on open enrollment?
I don't see open enrollment ending because the state is an advocate of school choice, very, very strongly an advocate of school choice. As you know, there are opportunities for parents within a large school district, if there's a child attending a failing school, to go to another school. The state very much supports the notion of giving parents opportunities to send their children where they want them to go, and also helping them financially to do so. So I have not heard any rumblings recently at all about open enrollment as a program.
And then if we looked as a board to get some more community feedback, i.e. like a survey. We had used WestGBrd151214B before, our survey company. I believe that our professional affiliation OSBA also offers some of those kind of, maybe that going forward, that's something we can look at, what kind of costs we'd be looking at in doing one of those surveys. And I think being a board member when that survey happened, that the whole entire board would have some input to the questions asked, and the information that we could gather from there would be somewhat helpful.
Are you saying you did think that happened or did not?
Did not. Did not.
I would
At least for
recommend-
this board member, I can only speak for myself. I didn't have any input whatsoever on what questions were asked. How many questions, how they were framed, having a little background in surveys, there was a lot of information that we didn't have that going forward, I think would be really important for the board and new board members to have an understanding of what information you're getting back from it.
Right, I have worked with survey companies in the past, and I think the most successful surveys of the world do have input from the board. And it needs to be a cross-section of the board as well, because I think it helps a great deal to engender a feeling of trust if everyone's voices heard, and people truly do try to ferret out of the survey the information that the schools need, the board needs to make decisions. I know that the people who put together the surveys are professionals, but they're not infallible. And I have worked with some where I have had to go back and say, I don't like that question, it's a misleading question, it's not going to give us the information that we want, et cetera, or express concerns of us about the questions. So I think the point is why survey companies, and I'm not casting anything negative at all against the company that did your survey, because it was, I should say our survey, but I wasn't here, so that's why I said your. I wasn't here, but they're a very highly respected firm. I would just say, if you're going to go out and do another survey, I'd recommend that you get a different firm just to see if the two firms, surveyors, come up with the same answers. And I think that you should actually always remember that the company that does your survey works for you. So that's not to say we don't want a valid survey, we do, but you want one that answers the questions that you the board wish to obtain.
Great. Very thorough job. Thank you very much.
Actually, okay.
That's one question. Do you see the state, I mean, I've always struggled with the students kind of being put at jeopardy for this whole thing, for open enrollment. So, if it was a perfect world, I would love if you take them and graduate them. Take a student, you guarantee them graduation. So that's my one question. Do you see that ever happening? And my second one is, what about siblings? As far as where that might go, in the future. But the graduations, because literally they could come one year and be out the next year, come one year, be out the next year. And to me, that doesn't serve the student. But do you think the state would ever change on that, or?
I don't think the state sees an inherent need to do that right now. And I think part of it is because the numbers of school choice opportunities for kids have increased exponentially. Through credit flex, where students can actually enter into an agreement with the school district that they reside in and take courses that are not traditional school courses, but that would address some of the standards that are contained in our courses, and maybe students taking private dance lessons and having substitutes as a requirement, et cetera, or they're taking courses at the college level, for instance, which could be through College Credit Plus, which can supplant courses that we offer at the high school level. I think they're seeing the menu of choices increase, so I don't think that open enrollment is occupying a very prominent place on their agenda right now. And I agree with you, Dr. Phelps. It seems as though there are many things that the state could do that would make this a more humane process, so that once a student is admitted, that student can stay and have a guaranteed spot. But open enrollment rules haven't changed in a long time. And I don't see the state expending much energy on what is an old model of school choice when they're putting so much emphasis on new models right now.
So for residential students, now you have overcrowded classrooms. By guaranteeing somebody a spot that really is only a one-year spot, because next year you could get 20 more kids in that grade. And then how do you tell residential parents that they now have 29 kids in their class? Because you guarantee those spots. I mean, I've talked with Kasich as well. I don't think that's living anywhere.
And the challenge is then you're forced, if you're doing what's best for kids, oftentimes to add staff. And then you're adding staff, and that's where open enrollment ceases to be a benefit to the district, because it becomes a draw on the district, because you're adding staff just to accommodate those open enrollment students that you have. That was really the challenge we were facing this year with kindergarten. We were right on the cusp of adding another staff member. And one of my challenges was, how do I defend adding another staff member, because we had 4 students that we took in through open enrollment. And we learned from that. We notified parents too early in kindergarten this year. As I say, we're moving to June to notify only kindergarten parents that their children have slots. We want to make sure that we have enough slots for our resident students for our non-discriminatory level. I have absolutely no aversion to adding staff when it's for the benefit of the students and it doesn't impose a hardship based on something like that. That was a tough one for me, because as I say, our kindergarten numbers this year are a little bit higher than I would like, and it was that very reason that kept me from being pushed very easily into the next year.
Dr. Marquardt, I have a question, which is not a core question about open enrollment, but I'm curious about it. As we decline in numbers, we are part of Excel Tech, which is in essence a cooperative venture between different school districts. And how does that impact us? You know, we are going to be, or do in fact spend more than we take in when we send a kid to Excel Tech. But is there some kind of commitment that we have as a district to keep a certain level of participation in Excel Tech?
I know of no requirement to have kids in Excel Tech. It's not a problem for us to meet any quota that we've set, because so many of our kids will go out to these programs. And one of the things that we have to look at moving forward, and I've already entered into these conversations, it's fully my intent to have at least one Excel Tech in this district by 2017-18. We've already visited another school that has a program very similar to the one that we'd like to replicate. And I've also had conversations with the other superintendents as recently as today. Today was not the first time, about our housing one and all the other districts with whom I've been in communication on board with our venue. Most districts that are Excel Tech members do have at least one unit in them. I think the only other district that does not is Solon. And I think WestGBrd has been outside the fold for too long on that. So we know we're planning to add one and possibly 2 units of items from the second one. That they might be a little less eager when I think I can read it, but that's okay.
Okay, the other thing I want to mention is the Ohio Board of Education has a map of the state with all the districts having open enrollment on it. And so, Rick, as you find that information, Dan, I can send you the link to that. 85% of the districts have some form of open enrollment. The districts that do not have open enrollment are primarily those who are contiguous to the inner city or older suburbs. So, take that into account. The other thing I was wondering, if we do a survey, well, really what I'm asking is, how do we keep our involvement in creating questions on that objective? Because what we really want to do, whatever the answers end up being, we certainly won't know what they'll be. We want to get the best possible answers. We want to have the most accurate survey, so we're really gauging the community. And what do you think is a good way for us to participate in your experience?
I think you engage a reputable firm, because the firm has a great deal of experience. They won't always agree with some of your concerns. And some of the things that you may say are, well, we don't like the way that question reads, we don't understand why you're asking that question. And they may say, well, it's because that question leads into the next 3 questions, and it's important that question be there. I guess one of the things that I would say is, I'm asking you as a board not to underestimate your own intelligence, and to remember that the firm may come into a survey for your work for you. And so I think any board that commissions a survey, if they're a principal board, wants the truth. They don't want slanted answers going to cater to their own personal perceptions, let's say. But I think that's the beauty of having representation from the board more than one person. I think everyone from the board should actually be able to take a look at the survey, meet with the surveyor and say, these are the things that I want to know. And then through that dialogue and through the process of crafting those questions, you can do it. I guess what I would say is trust surveyors to understand how to compose a survey, because it's what they do for a living, but don't take your hands off the wheel. You can get a survey that when it's done, you look at it and say, well, there were 3 things that I wanted to know that the survey doesn't tell me. And unless you're at the table when the survey is developed, you're not going to be sure that those things are answered. They can help you with the nuts and bolts of it.
I just have one last question, because I heard you touch base about the opportunity of trying to house at least one Excel Tech. And that will help to keep some of our students and potentially even bring other students from other districts. What conversations have been had about dual credits? Because if we can, not send all of our students down the road to Lakeland, Notre Dame, potentially get some of our staff certified to be able to teach those classes, we keep our kids safer, we keep dollars in our district.
We're having conversations around that, because I guess I'll answer a couple things. One is that we have a relationship right now, which is a mutually beneficial relationship with Lakewood College, whereby our participation rates for our kids' tuition payments, we pay there a fraction of what they would pay normally. So we do have a very, very good relationship with them that's scratched out, so it's not as big a drain on the district as what it would typically be. We also have approached our staff about meeting the necessary, is it endorsements or concentration? What's the word I'm looking for?
Concentration, really.
Concentrations in the subject area. And
Yes.
I believe it's 12 graduate hours.
18, although depending on service, they look at a variety of, a myriad of things, but primarily the core requirements.
17. The biggest problem we have typically in most high schools is that to be listed as an adjunct professor for most of the colleges and universities, they want someone initially, ideally with a master's in the subject area that they teach. So in other words, if you are teaching biology, they'd like you to have a master's in biology. If you're teaching history, they'd like you to have a master's in history. Most high school teachers, if they have a master's in curriculum instruction. I'm not saying everyone, so I'm not trying to offend any of the teachers who are here, but it's relatively rare to find a teacher who has a master's in the academic area that they teach. I was a little bit of an odd duck, and I had a master's in history, so I could teach. I'm not volunteering, but I could teach. If a school took me on as an adjunct professor, I could continue to basically the subject space courses pretty much. But if you don't have that master's, short of that, they're asking for the concentration of 18 hours in the subject area, and that's something that obviously requires a time commitment of our teachers because they have to go back and have to accrue those hours, or a combination of those hours and some work experience to qualify. So that's the biggest challenge, I think, and it's not unique to us. I think that's common in most schools that you go to. There are really very few high school teachers who have concentration in the academic area that they teach. It's usually an education curriculum type.
So, what's your experience with districts downsizing and simply choosing to do that? I mean, one example here is Newberry, which has remained independent in spite of incredible shrinkage, in spite of just being very small by today's standards, even if they had as many students as they ever had. And they seem to be doing reasonably well. It's more expensive for them, at least in terms of the millage, but they have a lower tax base. But
I think there are a number of ways you can gauge the effectiveness of the school district. Certainly one of them is the district report card, and that's the gauge that people typically go to when they want to get a quick glimpse of a school district. But a lot of districts now, and I know WestGBrd has never been one to get it, will also put out a quality profile. There are a whole lot of intangibles in terms of the number of AP offerings you put out there, the quality of your extracurricular programs and your co-curricular programs. You have a fine arts program that's viable. Any district that is under 1,000 kids cannot compete qualitatively on a broad spectrum with the offerings at a large school can make available to the students. I'm not saying anything negative against the small schools because they do a great job with the resources that they have, but I would tell you the districts downsize usually for one of two reasons. If a district is downsizing, in many cases it's because the future of the district is in doubt. When people see a building closed in the district, unless that building is being replaced by, for instance, a consolidated building where you're closing 2 or 3 elementaries and building a new state-of-the-art beautiful elementary, people don't see that as the demise of the district. But if people see a district close a building or close multiple buildings and there's no better facility replacing those, they consider that the district that, at least in the scope of its programs, is a declining district. The quality of the program still may be excellent, and I can guarantee you, you could go around and you could look at any of the smaller districts in the area. They have some absolutely superstar teachers in those districts, and they have some wonderful kids. And some really quality education is going on. However, when you look at the opportunities that students have in those smaller districts, the districts cannot possibly, with the limited resources they have, offer the scope of opportunities that a larger district has. I'm not trying to defend any of our neighbors in saying that, I probably just did.
Okay, this will be on our website for folks that didn't get a chance to see this presentation along with slide and notes. Great. Thank you. We'll move on to the superintendent's recommendation.
I am asking for a resolution from the board to approve the staff appointment listed in the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Katsowski.
Yes.
Dr. Cox.
Yes.
Mr. Thorson.
Yes.
Mrs. DeTore. Yes. Mr. Douglas.
Yes.
Next, I'm asking for the approval of a suspension.
So moved.
I'll second. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Douglas.
Yes.
Mr. Katsowski.
Yes.
Dr. Cox.
Yes.
Mr. Thorson.
Yes.
Mrs. DeTore. Yes.
The next resolution is for an unpaid leave of absence for the individual listed.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Katsowski.
Yes.
Dr. Cox.
Yes.
Mr. Thorson.
Yes.
Mrs. DeTore. Yes. Mr. Douglas.
Yes.
I'm asking that the board approve the district supplemental assignments for 2015-16 listed.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Roll, discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Thorson.
Yes.
Mrs. DeTore. Yes. Mr. Douglas.
Yes.
Mr. Katsowski.
Yes.
Dr. Cox.
Yes.
The next resolution seeks approval of the certified substitute list, December 3rd, 2015.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Katsowski.
Yes.
Dr. Cox.
Yes.
Mr. Thorson.
Yes.
Mrs. DeTore. Yes. Mr. Douglas.
Yes.
I'm asking that the board approve the classified substitute list included.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Thorson.
Yes.
Mrs. DeTore. Yes. Mr. Douglas.
Yes.
Mr. Katsowski.
Yes.
Dr. Cox.
Yes.
I'm asking that the board approve a special license agreement for use of the theaters in Playhouse Square. This is for the purpose of graduation.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
The church that we used to use is not available.
No, the church is available. It is highly recommended for public school districts that they not utilize a sectarian place of worship as a forum for graduation ceremonies.
I know some people are upset by our use of the church. Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, the church is not available, and I guess it is now, but it's going to entail how much extra cost?
This will be probably an additional cost of between $4,000 and $5,000 to do this, but the venue is spectacular. It's the Playhouse Theater. I think it will give our kids a graduation ceremony of which they and you and their parents will be very, very proud and talk about for years.
And I frankly have had people complain that we have had it in the secondary institution, as you said, there are people who are offended with that, particularly if it's not their religion.
And I believe graduation is a ceremony about which everyone should feel good. There are some families who may object on religious grounds, and I would expect the students would perhaps participate in that ceremony, but I'm not sure that all of their extended family members will attend as a result of that. And I want graduation to be an absolutely wonderful, memorable experience for all of our students, not just those who subscribe to the Christian faith. And that is not in any way, I used to attend that church myself, so it's not in any way a negative remark toward the church.
Or their facilities, which
No,
are
it's
incredible.
beautiful facilities, and we've had nothing but praise for the services they've offered us in past years. It's merely a recognition of doing what I believe to be right for all of our students.
There's a national watchdog group that receives school districts that try to have graduations in churches.
Well,
It happened before my clients last week.
I'm fortunate that we have been proactive and not put in that situation. Thank you.
It's a lose-lose.
Roll call?
Mr. Douglas.
Yes.
Mr. Katsowski.
Yes.
Dr. Cox.
Yes.
Mr. Thorson.
Yes.
Mrs. DeTore. Yes.
I'm asking the board tonight to accept two donations to the district. I'd like to read what these are for you prior to your acting on them. The first is to accept the donation of the home gate and the visitor's gate to the West Geauga High School track and Howell football field, made possible by the generosity, resources, and efforts of Michael and Maureen Kilroy and family, Monty and Christine Curtis and family, the CR Construction Company, I know Bob is here tonight, and the turf committee of the Wolverine Gridiron Club. So special thanks to all of those individuals, families, and groups who made possible this very generous donation to the district. And by the way, it's beautiful. Both are beautiful.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Well, we need a second donation too. So.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
We'll put them together.
Thank you.
The second is that the district also received a check for $100. This is for the student council account at West Geauga Middle School, and this was from Cliff Lanes. So I'd like the board also to accept that resolution. Any contribution?
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Dr. Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Thorson?
Yes.
Mrs. DeTore?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Katsowski?
Yes.
Before we go any further, I would like to let the board know that we have in fact completed the gates now with the installation of hardware on those gates. And we talk about finishing touch. They really are very, very beautiful. And not only do they enhance the security of the track and the field, but they also are really just very, very impressive architectural performance in their grounds. I'm asking now that the board approve annual OSBA memberships.
So moved. Second.
Discussion?